why wouldn't there be a crusade to try to win this back?
Well, and sometimes people say, well, it took a long time for the Crusaders to respond. It took 450 or so years. It took that long for a crusade to be declared, but it did not take that long for Christians to counterattack. Christians had been counterattacking in other ways. The Byzantines, the Eastern Christians, had been counterattacking repeatedly. And in the 10th century, Byzantine armies got as far into the Holy Land as Nazareth. Their logistic lines got overextended and they couldn't make it any further and had to withdraw. But they were trying. And the Italians and the southern French were trying. The Spanish were beginning their Reconquista in the Spanish Peninsula. So there are plenty of other earlier examples of Christian forces counterattacking. The Crusades is just another one.
When you contrast, for example, the world of Augustine in the 4th and 5th centuries. All of North Africa is Christian. 1,000 years later, none of it is. What happened?
Well, within 1 or 2 centuries, I mean, when you look at what Muhammad did in a short life, you know, he was a teacher, but he was a warrior first and foremost, and a very effective one. And Muslims are not quiet about that. They're very proud and grateful for his legacy. And so when you compare Jesus and Muhammad and the two religions they found, when Christians just simply kill in the name of Christ, they're often betraying, you know, their founder. But when Muslims follow Muhammad in conquering the Dar al-Jihad, that part of the world that has not submitted to the Dar al-Islam, you know, this is something of imitative behavior. And it's something that is virtuous in their understanding. We, you know, as uncomfortable as that makes us feel, it's time to grow up. You know, look at them from them, you know, their own perspective. And this also helped me understand why, really until the 19th century, Muslims did not think that the Crusaders were, you know, these vandals and these, you know, they respected Christian warfare as, you know, an attempt to kind of match.
These were honest adversaries.
Honest adversaries, that's correct,
That's a good way to put it.
And even in the course of the Crusades, the Muslims preferred honest, wholehearted Christian adversaries. On the 6th Crusade, the German Emperor Frederick II went to negotiate, not fight, and went out of his way to badmouth Christians to his Muslim hosts, and his Muslim hosts were offended. And basically said to him, why don't you be a good Christian and play your own side? Stop
and fight.
Stop being a traitor.
And again, we want to say that this is not to deny the evils that were happening at the time of the Crusades. You know, the slaughter of Jews at times by the Crusaders. You know, Pope Urban II condemned that.
As did Bernard of Clairvaux.
That's right.
That was not an integral part of the Crusades.
No, in fact, it was a violation of the spirit.
There were plenty of violations of the spirit and of the rules for the Crusades, but that, as you said, doesn't invalidate the principle.
And just to go to another myth here, just in our limited amount of time, I mean, it's often brought up, you know, we just talked about some of the atrocities that are often thrown that are really missing context and historically inaccurate. Was there a motivation of, as a lot of people talk about it, as a motivation of greed and wealth and trying to capture all of this? Is that, help put that in some historical context?
No, that's myth. That's
like au contraire. It's like exactly the opposite.
I could answer that question simply by saying no. Let me tell you an interesting story that I just discovered the other day from the 13th century. There was a French nobleman, Enguerrand de Coucy, who was a jerk, to put it technically. He found some young men trespassing on his property, and he executed them, just for trespassing, basically. The case went to Louis IX, King Louis of France, who was a Crusader king. Louis tried him, found him guilty, and among other things, sentenced him to 3 years crusade.
Is that right?
Which he had to redeem by paying 12,000 livres, which is a huge amount of money. I'm telling you that story to show you that by the middle of the 13th century, crusading was viewed as so difficult and so dangerous and so expensive that it was along the lines of a fine.
So instead of a penitentiary being slapped, you know, put in there, this is a penitential.
Which happened very many times to a lot of people.
So people weren't rushing off to make their money in the crusade.
It became a means of atonement.
It became a means of atonement.
For sin. For
one of the reasons that people think that it was an opportunity to make your fortune is, again, going back to Fulcher of Chartres, to his chronicle. The same one that said that Jerusalem's streets ran so deeply with blood, he also said, come east and become rich and get a large amount of land to rule. That's an advertising brochure,
Right,
and
yeah,
it's probably not much more accurate than the ones you get for condos in Florida.
Yeah, or join the army and see the world.
Pretty much, yeah.
And they often had a fund. Reading all of your articles, there's a number of references to them having to fund it, and upwards of 6 years worth of taxes for one of the kingdoms to just fund a crusade.
On the Seventh Crusade for Louis IX. It's very hard to translate medieval money into modern money. But roughly speaking, for a knight to go on crusade, it would have cost him about the equivalent of $250,000 today.
I see. Wow.
So they had to do things like
and this was
mortgage
voluntary.
This was voluntary.
And risky. I mean, the point
Their
is,
lives were.
in the First Crusade, many of them, most, did not return. And the losses are staggering.
And
losses
people
are
knew
very
that,
high.
right? I mean,
Yes.
so people.
Yeah, I think
was
you're
very
75%
Yeah,
as a
yes,
casualty
it's
rate.
extremely
That's pretty
high.
high.
It's
That's an
extremely high.
unbelievable